Michael Jordan is undoubtedly the greatest basketball player of them all. Yeah, anyone else who came up in MJ's generation can count themselves pretty unlucky, to be honest, as in any other generation, the other superstars in the 80s and 90s would have certainly been the best of their time. So, who were Michael Jordan's greatest rivals? There were a few of them, so sit back and relax as we take a trip down memory lane. Isiah Thomas spent the entirety of his playing career with the Detroit Pistons, which meant a pretty fierce rivalry with MJ and his Bulls team. I mean, even before he starred for the Pistons, he was a pretty big star in basketball circles after helping the Indiana Hoosiers to the 1981 NCAA championship. And he also had to deal with the fact that he was never the biggest dude in a sport dominated by giants. Yep, there was a ton of fight in that dog. Older NBA heads will probably remember just how hated the Pistons really were during this era, as they literally bullied anyone and everyone they came up against. And Thomas was in the thick of all of that. And then some. The Pistons were arguably one of the most hated teams in NBA history, whether it was Bill Laimbeer getting into it with Larry Bird or Rodman and MJ getting it on. Yep, the Pistons were nobody's cup of tea during this era of the late 80s as they swept to the NBA title in 89 and 90. And it's safe to say Thomas had MJ and the Bulls' collective number. You might even remember those rumors that Thomas himself had instigated a freeze-out in Jordan's first All-Star game back in 1985. Yep, that's right. That first game ended pretty horribly for MJ, as he registered just 7 points, with many suggesting that those other dudes on the team had decided to teach him a lesson due to his perceived big ego. Surely not, right? Well, rumors still persist, even to this day, almost 40 years later, so there might just be a touch of truth in them, right? Of course, the Bulls would kick on in the 90s with the emergence of Pippen and Grant, but MJ would hold a grudge against Thomas for the rest of his career and actually stopped him from becoming a part of the first NBA Dream Team, telling selectors it was him or Isiah. Pretty childish behavior all around, wouldn't you say? Another big rival of MJ's was Dominique Wilkins, one of the most athletic dudes to ever grace the NBA. The two-time NBA dunk champ is the 13th highest NBA scorer of all time, with 26,668 points. But arguably, Wilkins should have won the dunk contest 4 times. Yep, one of those times it was awarded to MJ, which is where their rivalry began. In the 1993 playoffs, Jordan's Bulls absolutely hammered Wilkins' Hawks. And even though MJ's rival put up a decent showing with 24 points in Game 1, 37 points in Game 2, and 29 points in Game 3, the Hawks simply couldn't deal with Mike. Yes, these two were decent rivals in the early to mid-90s, but Wilkins never really did much in the playoffs. Despite never winning an NBA title, Wilkins' personal achievements were pretty stellar though. Yep, the dude is a 9-time NBA All-Star and was also the league's scoring champion back in 1986 and is almost certainly one of the greatest players in history to ever wear an NBA ring, which is pretty sad to be honest. A truly great player, and I'm sure you'll agree. Clyde Drexler and Michael Jordan could easily have ended up on the same team if the Blazers had played their cards right back in the 80s. Yep, they will almost certainly be ruining their decision to use up their second pick overall on a talented but injury-prone Sam Bowie. I mean, casual NBA fans these days may not have even heard of Bowie, and we all know what MJ went on to do. The possibility of MJ running the point and Drexler at shooting guard was a very real one and would have been one of the sickest backcourts of all time. But the Trailblazers wasted their pick, which was very much to the Bulls' advantage, wouldn't you say? Of course, with those two dudes playing the same position and also having a similar acrobatic style, they were always going to draw comparisons to each other. In an era chock full of great shooting guards, Jordan and Drexler stood out as the two best, and when MJ came up against these other dudes, who he was often compared to, he usually turned on the style, right? The pair slugged it out against each other in the 1992 NBA Finals, as the Bulls took on the Trailblazers, in what would end in a 4-2 win for MJ's superstars. During the finals, Jordan wanted to show just how much better than Drexler he was, and even showed off an underused part of his game, by dropping 6 3-pointers in the first half, then simply shrugging. In what might now look like a pretty strange decision, the Blazers would trade Drexler to the Rockets for Otis Thorpe in the 94-95 season. Turned out he was still one of the best shooting guards in the league, as he led the Houston outfit to one of the most unlikely title runs in NBA history, as he was reunited with former college teammate Hakeem Olajuwon. Yep, Clyde the Glide was a great player, but MJ was better, let's be honest, right? The pair's rivalry would be highlighted in the 1992 EA Sports game Bulls vs. Blazers and the NBA playoffs, which any self-respecting NBA NBA head would have had in the early 90s. Another player who MJ was compared to a lot throughout his career was your boy Reggie Miller, another all-time great who unfortunately never won a ring. The best three-point shooter of his era, Miller was a scoring threat from virtually anywhere in the opponent's half, and during his time with the Pacers, they would be a fixture in the playoffs, despite never actually managing to win a title. What made this rivalry so great was the fact that both of these dudes knew how to talk and wind each other up. I mean, just look at old footage of a Pacers versus Bulls game, and you'll almost certainly see these two chirping at each other throughout the game. It was magic. Due to the fact that the Pacers often had what it took to beat MJ and the Bulls, it made these games a true spectacle. During the Miller and Jordan era, and with their excellent interior presence, the Pacers were able to turn each game against their Chicago rivals into something of a dogfight, which absolutely suited them. And who can forget that sucker punch from MJ on Miller in February 1993? Yeah, you older NBA heads will remember, right? Amazingly, it was actually Miller who was thrown out of the game, and he even received a $6,000 fine, whilst nothing happened to MJ. Yeah, it pays to be the golden boy, right? Well, he actually was given a retrospective fine and a one-game ban, but their rivalry was far from over. Yep, they again met in the 1998 playoffs, with Reggie sinking a fantastic three over MJ in Game 6 to take it to a 7th game, where Jordan showed his true colors by completely shutting down Miller time in the 4th. Similar to a lot of other dudes in that era, Reggie Miller was a fantastic shooting guard, but can count himself slightly unlucky to have played in the same era as Jordan. Like, yeah, he won a slew of personal awards, such as being a 5-time NBA All-Star, but when compared to Michael Jordan, who just had a knack of dragging his team over the line and coming up clutch when desperately needed, Reggie Miller just comes up short. Of course, I'm not suggesting that he wasn't a great player. He definitely was, just not as great as the Chicago Bulls' legendary number 23, you know what I mean? Jordan's other great rival during this era was the Boston Celtics legend Larry Bird. I mean, this dude had everything, but then so did MJ, one of the only players in history who can truly be talked of in the same breath as Jordan. Bird was a 3-time NBA champion during the early part of Michael's career. Larry had the ability to break his opponents mentally and was, quite simply, as cold-blooded as they came. After a tough upbringing in Indiana, Bird was drafted by the Celtics in '79 and spent his entire career in Boston. Yeah, together with Magic Johnson, Bird dominated the NBA in the early 80s. That was until one Michael Jordan came through. Bird knew he had to up his game to keep pace with MJ. I mean, this was a dude who averaged 28.2 PPG straight off the bat, so Larry had a lot to think about. This rivalry was kind of the old versus the new during the 80s, and the pair would come up against each other in the 85-86 postseason. Yeah, I know, MJ had just returned from injury and didn't have anything like the team Bird had around him, but he still had a solid account of himself by scoring an impressive 49 points in Game 1, 63 in Game 2, and a near triple-double of 19 points, 10 rebounds, and 9 assists in Game 3. As we know, the Celtics got the job done, but Jordan had seriously impressed Larry Legend, who revealed that he had no idea that anyone was capable of doing what Michael has done to us. And Bird would go on to further sing MJ's praises by calling him the most exciting, awesome player in the game today, before then suggesting that it was God himself disguised as Michael Jordan. Like, can you imagine Larry Bird saying this about you? Pretty insane, am I right? Yet Bird was humble enough to give MJ props, which just showed what a great dude he was, right? We all know about Michael Jordan's greatness, of course, but it was guys like the ones we've mentioned today who made him what he was. Like, if he didn't have the competition, he probably wouldn't have ever been as good as he turned out to be. You know what I mean? Well, that's a wrap for this video. Make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more. We'll see you next time. Until then, bye.